started. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sorry we couldn't make it to pitch our session to you, but I'm quite pleased you made it here anyway. My name is Sophie Quist. I work for Nourish Scotland. We're a Scottish food policy organisation working for a fairer, healthier and more sustainable food system in Scotland and beyond. And today I'm representing especially the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration Secretariat, which we coordinate together with the International Panel of Experts for Sustainable Food System, IPES Food, and a host of partners, including Sustain, where my colleague Ruth is from, and Glasgow City Council, where Joe Brady is joining us from as well. Thanks so much to Anna Lisman for the invitation. So today I'm going to cover the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, what it is and how it works to bring food systems and cities to COP26, which will be in Glasgow later this year. Just checking that the screen share is working and you're seeing my next slide. Is that right? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So why bring food systems to COP26, which is what the Glasgow Declaration is all about? COP26 in Glasgow is going to be probably the most important climate conference since Paris. It's tasked with the monumental challenge of driving action up to actually meet 1.5 degree target. And food systems need to be part of that. That is one of the central messages of this initiatives. Food systems contribute around a third of global greenhouse gas emissions. They're also vulnerable to the impacts of climate change itself, and they simultaneously hold so many of the solutions, not just for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to climate change, but also with co-benefit for biodiversity, for livelihoods, and for cultures and community. Food is essential, and it needs to be at the table at COP. Yet, climate change policy debates often fail to consider these interconnected nature of food systems and climate and involve the plurality of local actors, including local governments around the world and farmers who are driving change on the ground. So what we're advocating for is that COP26 includes a participatory whole food systems approach, so that's at the negotiations table, to enable delivering effective food and climate policies for planetary health. So what's really at the heart of this declaration is policy coherence, and that's an approach that integrates economic, social, environmental, and governance dimensions into policymaking to develop food system sustainability, and that's at the heart of the declaration. In most countries, however, responsibility for food policies are split across several departments and ministries, whether that's agriculture, health, trade, labor, environment, and each of these areas set agenda based on different goals. So the natural tendency is to work, in most of our work, is that we engage in our own levels, in our own sectors, and focus on our immediate policy priorities. And that can lead to forgetting or deprioritizing the crucial links that need to be made between these different sectors in order to have effective policies that address the climate impacts of food systems and adaptation. That doesn't mean that sector-specific policies aren't really important. They definitely are. But it's very important that we create spaces for the trade-off to be explored. So I'm just getting a bit of feedback. So one example of the absence of horizontal integration, which is integration across policy areas, would be when you have climate strategies for net zero targets, while food and drink departments in the same governments are developing strategies that rely on greenhouse gas intensive products. And taking a food systems approach through integrated food policies allows us instead to consider that there are different problems in the food systems that are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has shown this very clearly, how public health, nature loss due to agriculture, food safety and distribution, access to food for everyone is all very interconnected. And integrated or citywide policies that are being adopted at the local level are a great example of where this is already taking place. Cities and subnational and local governments are really leading the way on whole systems approaches, of very innovative approaches of bringing citizens in, of joining up different sectors, not least because local governments and cities are closer to citizens and are able to get diverse stakeholders around the table for these inclusive and participatory policymaking and democratic conversations. However, we also experience that at the national recognition for this innovation is often failing or lacking, and that national level policies either fail to incentivize or even create barriers for such local innovation. A frequent example is how national competition rules, dietary guidelines, or other policies will prevent local governments from adopting sustainable local procurement policies, for example, for school meals. And so therefore, COP26 is a unique opportunity to shine a light on these climate and food connections and raise the critical role of local government in tackling these. And the key message we're sending here is really that national governments need to be as ambitious as local governments. And that's what's at the heart of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, which brings together ambitious local and subnational governments to use and develop local integrated food policies as a key tool to fight in the fight against climate change. The Glasgow Declaration is also a call to action on national governments, asking them to drive up ambition and meet the ambition of local governments and create enabling environments and work together and ensure vertical as well as horizontal integration. The declaration is deliberately high level and inclusive. It doesn't prescribe what sustainable food systems look like, but recognize that there is a plurality of solutions on the ground and advocates for joined up approaches. So as a collaborative effort, the declaration builds on local previous work on local food systems like the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, the C40 Food Department ICLEI Sustainable Food Places in the UK, URBACT, and many others. And we've worked with all these partners. I think these are most of them, but there are a few more on the website, to make sure that the declaration is relevant and unique and adds value to the work already going on the ground. The declaration itself, which you can read on glasgowdeclaration.org in detail, has 3 commitments. The first is to develop and implement integrated food policy strategies. So this is commitments that local and subnational governments who sign the declaration reaffirm or take on. So to develop integrated food strategies as a key tool to fighting climate change, and to ensure that these instruments adopt a food systems approach and that they involve actors across all parts of the food chain. The second commitment is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from urban and regional food systems, and to work to build sustainable systems that are able to rebuild ecosystems, deliver safe, healthy, accessible, affordable, and sustainable diets for all. And the final commitment is to call on national government to establish enabling policy frameworks and multi-level and multi-actor governance mechanisms. So this is one of the key messages that we'll be bringing to COP26. Fantastic. So currently, more than 45 cities, local and subnational governments from over 5 continents have signed the declaration since we launched in December 2020. And we're hoping for this number to grow as COP26 gets closer. So I hope that many of you will join us as well. One of the ways we plan to raise the profile and work of Glasgow Declaration signatories are doing is through a series of short case studies that explore the ways in which our signatories are adopting integrated food policy approaches that have climate objectives in them. We're launching these over the summer, but I just wanted to give you a few tasters to show some of the initiatives that we're highlighting with this work. So we've recently spoken to the city of Sao Paulo, who are developing a really exciting policy that supports farmers in the peri-urban area to transition to agroecology. This actually started by wanting to protect water sources from fertilizers and other pollution from farming and agriculture, but they're now supporting farmers to then supply organic food for the city and expanding that network. This is also connected with setting up citywide composting facilities so that they have a circular food system in Sao Paulo city. Another great example that we've had the pleasure of interviewing is the French village of Monsatou, who have developed, who started by reducing the food waste from their local canteens and used that to fund the establishment of a municipal farm that is fully organically certified and supports and feeds the school food, supplying local organic vegetables for the schools. And they're expanding this practice, providing opportunities for people to get into local farming. Finally, and I'm sure people can give us more details about this, we have Glasgow City, who have just launched their citywide food plan, which is an example of integrated food policy that has 6 themes, and I think it's 76 action plans. And this includes lots of actions on climate change, looking at creating more space for growing in the city and creating markets for local food, local and sustainably produced food. So these are some of the examples of our signatories that we'd love to highlight, and I'd love to hear from anyone in the audience if you have examples from the local governments you work with that we should include as well. On the road to COP26, we are going to be at a number of events leading up to COP, which takes place the first couple of weeks in November, including the Milan Pact Global Forum in Barcelona and the pre-COP in Milan. And these will all be opportunities in global forums to raise awareness of the link between food and climate and drive up this ambition. Finally, I'll end on a couple of invitations. So the first is, of course, to sign the declaration. I'll get on in a second on how to do that. But the other is that we will have a high-level event at COP26 itself for signatories of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. This is co-hosted with Glasgow City Council, with C40, ICLE, and other partners. We still don't know if it'll be virtual or in person, but we hope to use this event to have the ear of national level policymakers and to highlight the importance of creating enabling environments for local action on food and climate change. And finally, a call to join the movement and sign the Glasgow Declaration, or to support your local government to do so. It's a really simple process, and what I should mention is, because this question comes up a lot, that there's no monitoring process that comes with it. This is a declaration focused on COP26, and it's very supportive in nature. So we will support you with knowledge sharing and creating contacts between different cities and how to implement the declaration. And Ruth will go into more details of different initiatives of how to do so. But to sign, you just go to glasgowdeclaration.org, and there is a short signature process where you can contact the Secretariat and indicate interest in signing and joining us. So on that note, thank you so much for listening. And I hope to see many of you in Glasgow in November for COP. Thank you. And over to Ruth.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Okay, I'm going to just grab the presenter role off you now. So just give me 1 second, and then I'll be able to share my screen. So it'll just take me a second. Okay, are you able to see? I am going to assume you can see the presentation. Great, because I can't see you, so that's fantastic. All right, thank you. So my name is Ruth Westcott, and I work for Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming. And we are very much like Nourish in Scotland, in that we work across the food system to campaign and run projects to improve the sustainability and health and of our food system, and also include workers' rights in our work as well. So we've done a lot of work on things like sugary drinks tax and policies around health. And my role is to try to really just to try to increase the visibility of food within the climate change movement. And I'd like to talk to you today about some work that we're doing particularly on local authorities and UK local councils, with the hope that it might have some relevance outside the UK, and also to show you how it links with the Glasgow Declaration and the stuff that's going on in the run-up to COP26. So in the UK, we have just about 400 councils, and we had a bit of a revolution climate change-wise about 3 years ago, because about 75% of the councils declared a climate and nature emergency. And in pretty quick succession, there was a real movement towards councils to declare and acknowledge the climate and nature emergency. But since then, about half have done something about it, but about half haven't. So by still overwhelmingly, half of the places that have declared a climate and nature emergency don't have an action plan that has been released yet to say how they will, what they'll do on the ground to combat emissions locally. And sort of tail end of last year, October, November, I read all of the action plans that have been released and had a look at how well they cover food. And to sort of cut a long story short, the answer is not very well. We actually found that 2/3 didn't mention food, except for small references in relation to food waste collection, which is a legal obligation for councils. So 2/3 of them didn't go beyond really what would be considered their legal obligation. And only 13 we considered to have an adequate reference to food-related emissions in their climate and nature emergency action plans. So that is 13 out of 398 councils with an adequate action plan for food. So we think there's a lot of work to do, and really I think that report, that little bit of research that we did, makes the case for the Glasgow Declaration, because it's setting the relevance of food within the context of the climate change movement across the UK at a sub-national level. So sort of in parallel to this movement through councils to work more on climate change, food partnerships have been setting up, and these are run and coordinated by the Sustainable Food Places Network. And about 50 have set up across the UK now, and they are independent groups, not councils, but they involve councils on their board of, their operational boards. And these are cross-sector partnerships that include representatives from voluntary organisations, businesses and councils, and they are developing their own food strategies and also working on a number of food-related campaigns locally, although I must add, not always directly related to climate change. A lot recently has been on food poverty and health. But so in parallel to the work of councils, these sort of independent grassroots organisations have been setting up in parallel. So our sort of ambition really is to try to bridge this gap between the understanding, the low levels of understanding and action at the moment at a council level on food and climate change, on the impact of food on climate change, but also on the power that local authorities have to tackle food-related emissions in their area. So we're developing what we're calling the Every Mouthful Counts Toolkit, which will be a way for councils to understand what they can do and what the climate change impacts of those actions are. And it's broken down into 5 categories. As you can see, the first one is to create policies and strategies, and signing up to the Glasgow Declaration is one of those strategies in there. And then we've broken down the key actions that councils can take into land use, reducing food waste and improving resource efficiency, serving sustainable food and improving citizens' diet. So that's procurement basically. And then supporting good food enterprises and businesses and jobs locally. And each of these categories will be broken down and into a number of discrete actions that fall within that category. And for many of the actions, we're able to add a rough tons of greenhouse gas emissions saved value that will allow councils to be able to understand roughly the greenhouse gas implications for their actions. And this is just an excerpt of one of the themes, land use planning and farming. And so you can see that the actions are listed there, and then there are drop downs which show the potential greenhouse gases saved, and there'll be more information about links and other evidence that places can go to. And of course, we're also listing co-benefits, because we really want to emphasise how important the food system is in delivering across a range of the priorities of a council. So that is kind of phase 1. We also have ambitions to do a second phase of this project, which would be to allow councils to have their own sort of dashboard and be able to record the actions that they're taking and have an understanding of the implications. But then also you would be able to show how well some of the leader councils are doing, and really make very good examples of the councils that are doing very well and show what's possible and really demonstrate leadership. So, for example, this is my fictional council, Kamala Harris Council, showing what that might look like, where a council would be able to record the actions that they've taken and what's in progress. And the vision for us on this is that we want to encourage councils that have taken the Glasgow Declaration to use this as a way of being able to sort of link, to be able to turn those declarations into action through a structured framework, which is really demonstrating the benefits and showing the really important things to work on. We want to make sure that councils are tackling the big issues and where the most climate change benefits sit. We also want to promote some radical action. I was really interested to see those case studies that Sophie brought through. And I think when it comes to subnational actors, that's where this conversation gets really interesting, because it's fair to say that in the UK, I think, the more radical and innovative an action, and certainly the action that has the most benefits for communities and societies across the UK so far, has been within councils and at a subnational level. We're not seeing as much leadership nationally and from the national government, and I hope that's not a controversial thing to say, but there's been some fantastic action at a local level. You know, Southwark Council wants to be the first to have 100% vegetarian primary school meals. Leeds Council has greatly reduced the meat served, and they've used panels of school children to help them understand, to help them make the case and understand what children actually want. And they've been able to show that actually the future generation are really keen on climate change and are quite happy to have less and better meat served. In fact, you know, their research has shown more so perhaps than the parents. You know, the children are kind of leading that. They're helping to let the children lead that charge. And I wanted to, you know, Enfield Council also making council land available for organic farming. So using the land, using the council's power as a landowner, and matching up people who want access to land with the land available in their area. Many councils have been rolling out drinking water fountains and refill projects to try to cut sugary drinks consumption, as well as making drinking water available. And one that I think is quite interesting to mention is Bath and North East Somerset Council, who have really taken the mantle on the large-scale tree planting ambitions of national government. And I know that's something across Europe, that tree planting and reforestation is a big priority for government when it comes to tackling climate change. And they've really looked at the way that that can be integrated into local food security with community orchards and integrating agroforestry into their plans, so that the trees are delivering multiple benefits. So it's food security as well as the climate change benefits. And I think we're really keen for that to be a priority, because there's a risk otherwise that the tree planting ambitions will see plantations of monoculture on land and won't deliver those benefits to communities, or be planted in a way which has those co-benefits and meets priorities for local communities. Bristol Council is a very interesting one to mention, because they've just introduced a ban on junk food advertising. And whilst obviously that's not a climate change priority, we think there is certainly mileage in considering what a climate-friendly advertising policy would be for food, and looking at some councils that might be interested in trialling that, or at least looking at what that would look like, and how a definition of a good food, of a good, sustainable and climate change friendly advertising policy would look. We're also interested in looking at whether this toolkit could be applicable internationally, and whether places that are outside the UK would be interested in using it. In which case, obviously, it would take a bit of tweaking. And I think, you know, but I think there's plenty of common indicators and metrics that we could use, and actually that I think that would be very interesting, because there are some policies in which certain places are, in certain countries across Europe, are miles ahead, particularly in procurement, for example. And then there are other places where others do very well. And I think if international places could be featured on a toolkit like that, it would really help to drive some ambition in places where things are less well developed, and help to identify some barriers which might be national policy, or you know, a lack of awareness about different issues. So I'm very interested in thinking about this as an international toolkit. Finally, if you're interested in getting more involved in this, I just encourage you to put your email in the chat, and then I can let you know when that toolkit is released. And, you know, even if it's just something for you to look at and be interested in, you know, I'm very happy to share that. And then if and when the international toolkit does happen, of course, I can come back to you with more information about that, and possibly to be involved in the design of that. Okay, there's my email address if you're interested in getting in touch directly. Thank you very much. I hope that was useful. I will stop sharing now, and hopefully we can perhaps move to some questions, because I actually haven't seen the chat, so I don't know if anything has been posted.